By 2030, the average Californian will need a 140% raise just to afford a home. And California isn't alone. Across America, the dream of homeownership is collapsing. Prices are racing ahead of wages, insurance is retreating, and even everyday costs are squeezing families to the breaking point. In Montana, a modest house could cost nearly $933,000. In New York, buyers may need to double their income to keep up. And in Washington, homes are projected to climb toward $900,000. The numbers are staggering, but the reality is even harsher. Families are being locked out of the very places they've called home for generations. This isn't about the ultra-luxury market. It's about ordinary Americans, teachers, nurses, first responders, being priced out by an economy that no longer matches their paychecks. Right now, we reveal the 10 U.S. states on track to become unaffordable by 2030. The states where the American dream is slipping fastest, and where millions may have no choice but to leave behind the only homes they've ever known. Montana has always carried a myth: the last best place. Big skies stretching endlessly, quiet towns where neighbors still know each other's names, affordable land where families could build a life from scratch. But by 2030, that myth may be gone. The numbers are staggering. By the end of this decade, the median home price in Montana is projected to reach $932,584. To keep up, the average Montanan would need an income increase of more than 144%, the largest affordability gap in the entire nation. And while Montana's cost of living index is just 96.4 today, slightly below the US average, that advantage is vanishing fast. What was once affordable frontier living is now transforming into a playground for the wealthy. During the pandemic, Montana became a magnet for out-of-state buyers. Remote workers armed with California or New York salaries rushed in, paying cash for homes in towns like Bozeman and Missoula. Second home buyers treated Montana's small cities like investment portfolios. Local families, earning modest wages in teaching, healthcare, or service jobs, never stood a chance in bidding wars. Entire communities shifted in a matter of years. Bozeman, once known for its university and mountain views, now has home prices rivaling the Bay Area. Billings and Missoula followed, caught in the same wave of speculative demand. And by 2030, the consequences will be impossible to ignore. Ordinary families, teachers, nurses, first responders will be shut out entirely. Homes nearing $1 million won't belong to the people who built Montana's communities. They'll belong to outsiders, investors, and those wealthy enough to treat Montana as a seasonal escape. The ripple effects reach far beyond homeowners. When property values climb, so do rents, taxes, and everyday costs. A cost of living index of 96.4 is meaningless when housing costs explode. Young families will leave, retirees on fixed incomes will be forced out, and the very identity of Montana as a place where people could still make it will slip away. And the cultural cost may be even greater than the financial one. Empty storefronts line small-town streets as local businesses struggle, schools shrink as fewer families can afford to stay. A state once defined by self-reliance and community begins to hollow out. By 2030, Montana's mountains will still rise, rivers will still run, and sunsets will still paint the horizon in gold. But beneath the beauty lies a sobering truth. Montana, once the embodiment of the American frontier dream, may no longer belong to the people who live there. It will belong to those wealthy enough to buy it, and that is a very different vision of the last best place. California has always been the land of dreams. From the Golden Gate Bridge to the beaches of Malibu, it is the place where ambition meets opportunity. The state built Hollywood, Silicon Valley, and the promise that if you worked hard enough, you could make it here. But by 2030, that dream may cost more than most Californians will ever be able to pay. The numbers tell a sobering story. The median home price is projected to climb to $1.2 million by 2030. To afford it, the average Californian would need an income increase of nearly 140%, far beyond what most households could ever achieve. And the cost of living index already sits at 141.6, the highest in the entire nation. For decades, people have accepted that California is expensive. But there is a difference between expensive and impossible. In San Francisco, $1 million starter homes are already common. In Los Angeles, young families fight bidding wars for modest houses in neighborhoods once considered far from desirable. Inland cities like Fresno and Riverside were once safety valves for affordability, but now even they are swept up in the same relentless surge. And so, families are leaving. California has led the nation in outbound migration for years. Between 2020 and 2023 alone, more than 500,000 residents packed up and moved to places like Texas, Arizona, and Nevada, trading in the dream of the Golden State for a chance at something affordable. But for those who remain, the pressure is crushing. Renters spend nearly half their income just to stay housed. Insurance companies are retreating from wildfire zones, leaving homeowners with sky-high premiums or no coverage at all. Everyday expenses, groceries, gas, childcare pile on top of housing costs, making California unaffordable not just to buy in, but even to live in. And this isn't just about economics. It's about identity. California has always been a symbol of possibility, a place for artists, dreamers, and risk-takers. But when only the wealthy can afford to live here, what happens to the teachers, nurses, small business owners, and workers who hold the state together? What happens to the neighborhoods, cultures, and communities that gave California its soul? By 2030, California will still have its sun-drenched beaches, its sprawling freeways, its towering redwoods and gleaming skyscrapers. But beneath the beauty lies a harsher reality, a state where the cost of the dream has climbed so high that millions may never reach it. California may still inspire the world, but for countless ordinary Americans, it will no longer be the land of opportunity. It will be the land of the unattainable dream. New York has always been a symbol of ambition. From the Statue of Liberty to the skyline of Manhattan, it represents the idea that if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. But by 2030, making it in New York may be impossible for anyone without wealth. The numbers are alarming. By the end of this decade, the median home price in New York is projected to reach $780,000. To afford it, the average New Yorker would need an income increase of more than 103%. And today, the cost of living index sits at 124.7, among the highest in the nation. That's not a stretch for millionaires on Wall Street. But for teachers, nurses, delivery drivers, and families living paycheck to paycheck, these numbers are crushing. Already, New York is one of the most rent-burdened states in America. In New York City, renters often spend 40 to 50% of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. Owning a home has become less of a dream and more of a fantasy, even for middle-class households. The crisis isn't contained to the city. Suburbs once considered affordable, places like Long Island, Westchester, and parts of upstate New York, are being swept up in the same wave of inflation. Demand from urban workers, combined with limited housing supply, is pushing prices higher everywhere. And the costs don't end with housing. Everyday life in New York is among the most expensive in the nation. Groceries, utilities, healthcare, childcare, every expense is magnified. The cost of living index at 124.7 tells the story. What costs $100 nationally costs nearly $125 in New York. The result? Families are leaving. In recent years, New York has seen hundreds of thousands of residents relocate to Florida, Texas, and other lower-cost states. Outmigration is no longer just a trend, it's a stampede. But for those who stay, the trade-off is constant pressure. Wages aren't keeping up with housing. Renters have little chance of saving for ownership. And homeowners face taxes, insurance, and maintenance bills that climb year after year. By 2030, New York will still be iconic. Tourists will still flock to Times Square. Broadway lights will still shine. The Statue of Liberty will still welcome ships into the harbor. But for ordinary families, the reality will be stark. New York will remain a global city, but one increasingly reserved for the wealthy and the transient. The teachers, nurses, firefighters, and service workers who give the city its soul may find they simply cannot afford to stay. And if even New York, the very symbol of opportunity, becomes unattainable, what hope remains for the rest of America? Rhode Island is America's smallest state, but its affordability crisis is anything but small. With just over 1 million residents, it has long been defined by coastal charm, historic neighborhoods, and tight-knit communities. But by 2030, even here, the American dream may collapse. The numbers are sobering. The median home price in Rhode Island is projected to hit $855,000. To keep up, the average household would need an income increase of nearly 100%. And today, the cost of living index is 109.3, already above the national average. For a state this small, those numbers carry outsized weight. Rhode Island doesn't have the economic diversity of California or New York. When housing becomes unaffordable, there are fewer safety nets. Housing supply has been tight for years. Rhode Island has one of the lowest inventories in the nation. Limited land, strict zoning, and coastal geography restrict new construction, while demand keeps rising. That scarcity alone pushes prices higher. For longtime residents, the impact is devastating. Families who have lived in the same neighborhoods for generations are being priced out of the places that carry their history. Younger couples hoping to put down roots are shut out entirely. Even retirees, once drawn here for the small state pace of life, are finding that fixed incomes can't keep up with escalating costs. And because Rhode Island is so small, there's no inland escape. In California, families move inland from San Francisco. In New York, some head upstate. But in Rhode Island, the entire state feels the crunch. The coast is everywhere. The crisis is reshaping communities. Stable neighborhoods now see turnover as families sell and leave. Wealthier buyers from Boston and New York, less than an hour away, scoop up properties as vacation homes or investments. Local residents with ordinary incomes are left behind. The ripple effects extend beyond housing. Businesses close when workers can't afford to live nearby. Schools face declining enrollment. Whole towns risk becoming shells, picturesque on the outside, hollow within. By 2030, Rhode Island will still have its lighthouses, cobblestone streets, and famous beaches. Tourists will still arrive for summer festivals and seaside escapes. But beneath the postcard image lies a harsher truth. The very people who gave Rhode Island its culture and community may no longer be able to live there. Rhode Island may be small, but its affordability crisis is a warning. If even the tiniest state becomes unattainable, what hope do larger, more complex states have in the years ahead? New Jersey has always been defined by proximity. It sits in the shadow of New York City and Philadelphia, a state of commuters, neighborhoods, and shore towns that thrive on location. For decades, it offered something rare: access to the biggest cities in America with a chance at suburban comfort. But by 2030, that chance may be gone. The numbers reveal the crisis. The median home price in New Jersey is projected to reach $845,000 by 2030. To keep pace, the average household would need an income increase of more than 94%. And today, the cost of living index is 114.8, already well above the national baseline. New Jersey was never cheap, but expensive is turning into unaffordable. The pressures start with housing. Once affordable suburbs in places like Middlesex and Union County are now far beyond the reach of middle-class families. Even smaller homes in commuter towns are routinely bid up by buyers priced out of New York. Across the state, supply can't meet demand and prices climb higher. Along the shore, the problem takes a different form. Coastal homeowners face soaring insurance premiums as companies retreat from flood-prone areas. For many, coverage is becoming unaffordable or unavailable, leaving families trapped between losing their homes or gambling against the next storm. For commuters, costs are stacked on top of costs. Mortgages or rent are already crushing, but add in tolls, parking, train tickets, and rising gas prices, and the financial load becomes unbearable. What was once a trade-off, pay more to live close to the city, is now an impossible equation. And New Jersey's tax burden only amplifies the pain. Property taxes here are the highest in the nation, averaging nearly $9,000 per household per year. For ordinary families, those bills hit as hard as a second mortgage. The result? The middle class is being squeezed out. Young couples hoping to buy their first home can't get in. Older homeowners face impossible choices as insurance and taxes devour their budgets. Even stable two-income families feel like they're falling behind. By 2030, New Jersey will still have its boardwalks, its diners, its shore towns, and commuter trains rolling toward the city. But beneath the familiar images lies a harsher truth. A state where suburban life, once the cornerstone of the American dream, may be reserved only for the wealthy. And if even New Jersey, long the bridge between city and suburb, coast and inland, becomes unreachable, it signals something larger. A future where not just iconic cities, but entire regions slowly slip out of reach for ordinary Americans. For years, New Hampshire carried a reputation as New England's affordable refuge. People left Boston for Manchester, Concord, or Nashua looking for more space, lower prices, and a quieter life just over the state line. It was the promise of small-town New England living without the Boston price tag. But that refuge is slipping away. The numbers tell the story. By 2030, the median home price in New Hampshire is projected to hit $833,000. To keep pace, the average household would need an income increase of more than 82%. And today, the cost of living index stands at 110.1, higher than the national average. For a state that once offered relief, those figures are alarming. The Boston effect has reshaped New Hampshire. As Massachusetts home prices soared, commuters and remote workers moved north. Their higher incomes allowed them to outbid locals, driving prices far beyond what New Hampshire's economy was built to support. Cities like Nashua and Manchester are no longer havens. They are extensions of Boston's overheated housing market. Smaller towns, once insulated from urban demand, now feel the pressure as buyers search further and further for anything affordable. The result is a housing market spiraling out of reach. Young professionals and families raised in New Hampshire are finding it impossible to stay. Renters face rising costs, homeowners are taxed at higher valuations, and even rural properties are swept up in the demand. For longtime residents, the change is cultural as well as financial. Communities built around local businesses and generational families are transforming into bedroom suburbs for Boston. Traffic on I-93 and I-95 tells the story: more cars, longer commutes, and fewer people who can truly afford to live where they work. New Hampshire has always prided itself on independence, no state income tax, a culture of self-reliance, a balance between small cities and wide-open forests. But those values are harder to hold when the cost of housing turns self-reliance into a luxury few can afford. By 2030, New Hampshire will still have its white mountains, its seacoast towns, and its crisp autumn leaves that draw tourists each fall. The beauty will remain. But beneath the scenery lies a stark reality. The state once known as Boston's affordable alternative may be just as unattainable as Boston itself. And if New Hampshire loses its role as a refuge, the question becomes clear: where does New England turn when even its last affordable option is gone? Utah was once America's hidden gem. Salt Lake City was known for its mountains, its open spaces, and its reputation as a family-friendly state with affordable housing. But that reputation is changing faster than anyone imagined. By 2030, the median home price in Utah is projected to reach $958,000. To keep up, the average household would need an income increase of more than 82%. And while Utah's cost of living index is 100.5 today, nearly level with the national average, it no longer reflects reality on the ground, because Utah is growing faster than almost anywhere in the nation. Between 2010 and 2020, Utah's population surged by more than 18%, the highest growth rate in the country. People came for jobs, open space, and affordability compared to California or Colorado. But that migration is transforming Utah's economy and housing market in ways few anticipated. Salt Lake City has become a booming tech hub, often called the Silicon Slopes. Startups and major firms in software, biotech, and digital services are expanding rapidly. With them come higher salaries, but also a tidal wave of demand for homes. The problem is, supply hasn't kept up. Utah is already short tens of thousands of housing units, and new construction can't close the gap. Starter homes vanish within days. Bidding wars are routine. Families that once planned to buy a modest house now find themselves priced out or forced into crowded rentals. For longtime residents, the change is disorienting. Children raised in Utah, expecting to settle near family, increasingly move away. Retirees hoping to downsize find that even smaller homes carry staggering price tags. The values that once defined Utah, big families, stability, community, are colliding with a market that no longer makes room for them. And the cultural shift is just as sharp. The influx of new residents fuels innovation, but it also fuels inequality. For every household lifted by six-figure tech salaries, many more are left behind, watching costs rise while wages lag. By 2030, Utah will still have its ski resorts, its national parks, its mountains towering above the valley. Tourists will still arrive to hike, ski, and explore. But for the people who live here, life may feel unrecognizable. Utah, once celebrated as the affordable refuge of the Mountain West, could instead become the clearest warning that even growth and prosperity, if left unchecked, can make a place unlivable. For decades, Idaho barely registered in national housing conversations. It was the quiet state, mountains, farmland, and modest cities where life felt slower and more affordable. But by 2030, Idaho could become one of the clearest symbols of how quickly affordability can collapse. The numbers explain the shift. By the end of the decade, the median home price in Idaho is projected to reach $777,000. To keep up, the average household would need an income increase of more than 82%. And today, Idaho's cost of living index is 102, slightly above the US average. On paper, those numbers may not sound as extreme as California or New York, but the speed of change tells a different story. Boise, once a sleepy capital city, has become one of the fastest rising housing markets in the nation. Fueled by migration from California, Washington, and Oregon, demand surged during the pandemic, and it hasn't slowed. Families priced out of coastal cities saw Idaho as a bargain. To locals, it was anything but. Incomes here never matched Silicon Valley or Seattle levels. Yet homes began selling as if they did. Families earning average Idaho wages suddenly faced markets behaving like San Francisco. The disconnect is staggering. Home prices racing upward while paychecks remain rooted in a modest regional economy. And it isn't just Boise. Meridian, Coeur d'Alene, and Idaho Falls have all been caught in the same surge. Once affordable towns are seeing bidding wars, cash offers, and rents rising far beyond what residents can handle. Even rural counties, once shielded by distance, are feeling the spillover effect. For Idahoans, the shift is cultural as well as financial. Communities once defined by stability and small-town character are changing rapidly. Longtime residents find themselves surrounded by out-of-state license plates, higher costs, and neighborhoods they no longer recognize. By 2030, the picture becomes unavoidable. A state where housing values approach $800,000, wages remain far behind, and affordability collapses for ordinary families. Idaho will still have its mountains, its rivers, its wide-open spaces. Tourists will still come to hike, ski, and fish. But beneath that beauty lies a harsher reality. The best-kept secret of the West has been discovered and priced out of reach. And that may be Idaho's fate, not to collapse suddenly, but to change so quickly that by the time residents realize what's happening, the place they once knew is already gone. Wyoming is often imagined as the last frontier. Wide open spaces, towering mountains, and small towns where life moves at a slower pace. It's a place where land seemed abundant and affordable, the kind of state people pictured when they thought about escape. But by 2030, Wyoming may become a state where affordability itself disappears. The numbers point to the shift. By the end of the decade, the median home price in Wyoming is projected to reach $703,000. To afford it, the average household would need an income increase of more than 81%. And while Wyoming's cost of living index sits at 97 today, slightly below the national average, that advantage is shrinking quickly. What makes Wyoming unique is the imbalance. This isn't just a housing market climbing steadily upward. It's a market torn between two realities. On one side are rural communities where wages have barely moved for decades. On the other side are resort towns like Jackson Hole, where luxury homes routinely sell for millions, and outside wealth sets the standard. The effect is distortion. Jackson Hole's luxury sales push up averages, but even outside those towns, affordability is slipping. Smaller cities like Cheyenne and Casper are experiencing their own price surges as demand spills across the state. Families once confident they could find a modest home now compete against investors, out-of-state buyers, and vacation homeowners. For locals, the gap between wages and prices is devastating. A teacher or mechanic in Casper earns nowhere near the income of a remote worker from San Francisco who decides to buy a second home in Wyoming. The result is the same everywhere. Locals push to the margins while outsiders reshape the market. And unlike larger states, Wyoming doesn't have the population density or infrastructure to absorb the pressure. When prices spike here, there aren't enough alternative communities to balance things out. Every increase ripples further, faster. By 2030, the state will still have its mountains, its open skies, its rivers winding through endless plains. But the promise that Wyoming represented, a refuge of affordability and freedom, may be gone. Because if even Wyoming, with all its space and simplicity, becomes unaffordable, then perhaps nowhere in America is truly safe from the forces remaking the housing market. Washington is often seen as the crown jewel of the Pacific Northwest. Seattle, framed by mountains and water, became a global hub of innovation and opportunity. The state has always offered a mix of natural beauty and economic power, forests, coastlines, and one of the most dynamic tech corridors in the world. But by 2030, that prosperity may come at a crushing cost. The numbers are striking. The median home price in Washington is projected to reach $900,000 by 2030. To afford it, the average household would need an income increase of nearly 79%. And today, the cost of living index is 112, already well above the US average. Seattle has been at the center of the surge. Fueled by tech giants like Amazon and Microsoft, wages rose for some, but housing costs soared for all. In the last decade alone, rents in Seattle climbed nearly 40%. For middle and lower income families, the squeeze has been relentless. And the problem is no longer confined to the city. Once affordable communities like Tacoma, Spokane, and even smaller towns along the I-5 corridor have seen the same inflationary wave. As buyers priced out of Seattle spread across the state, affordability collapsed everywhere. Washington's challenge is layered. Tech growth attracts high earners from across the country and around the world, but housing supply has lagged. Zoning restrictions, limited land, and population growth combine to create a shortage that construction alone hasn't solved. For longtime residents, the impact is stark. Lifelong Seattle families leave for Idaho or Oregon. Young professionals, once confident they could build a future here, now juggle rising rent and impossible home prices. Even households with steady two-income salaries feel like they are falling further behind. And then there is the cultural shift. Washington's communities, once defined by balance, urban progress, alongside working-class neighborhoods and rural towns, are fracturing. The divide between those lifted by tech and those left behind grows wider each year. By 2030, Washington will still have its snow-capped peaks, its islands, its vibrant cities. Tourists will still come to Pike Place Market, ferries will still cross Puget Sound, and tech will still thrive. But the cost of calling Washington home will tell a different story. What was once a state where opportunity and livability coexisted may become a place where only the fortunate can remain. And if Washington, with all its wealth and resources, cannot keep affordability alive, then what chance does any state in America have? By 2030, these 10 states may tell the same story. Homes too expensive, wages too low, and families caught in the middle of a dream slipping away. From Montana's wide-open plains to California's crowded coast, from New York's relentless rents to Washington's soaring tech-driven prices, the pattern is clear. Affordability is collapsing. And with it, the promise of stability that once defined the American dream. This isn't just about numbers on a chart. It's about families leaving the towns they've called home for generations. About young people realizing they may never buy a house in the state where they were raised. About retirees watching their fixed incomes eroded by costs they can't control. By 2030, America may look the same on the map, but beneath the surface, entire communities could be transformed, reshaped by migration, inequality, and the simple math of prices that no longer match paychecks. The question isn't just which states will be unaffordable, it's who will still be able to stay. If you want to understand where Americans are moving next and which places might rise as others collapse, make sure you subscribe to Shifting America. The story is only beginning.